thank you, Althea. I'm gonna wait for my slides to show up here, but I'm here to talk about Zupass and this ecosystem we're instantiating around. Everyone might notice as they registered for the event, they had to pull up this weird kind of green app with a QR code. So I'm here to explain what that's all about and how you can help contribute and also get a sense of where all this technology is going. So I want to start off with a bit of a prompting question, which is, what does going to a crypto conference feel like, or what did it feel like 5 or 10 years ago? Okay, so it's a bit of a drawing. So you have these attendees on the bottom. They use something like Eventbrite, Gmail to receive their emails, Telegram to join sort of a chat. You have a whole bunch of data spread across these different apps, right? You have, for example, transactions of payments. You have proofs of attendance via records in Eventbrite's database. And you have communications and relationships between attendees. So that was kind of the stack 10, 15 years ago. Well, what does it look like today or in the present day? It's pretty much the same picture, right? Maybe we use a slightly different ticketing system, for ETH Prague using like pre-ticks or TickETH rather than Eventbrite, and we also offer Ethereum payments, but it hasn't really looked too much different in terms of the actual experience itself. So what could it look like going into the future, right? What could go into a conference and for someone experiencing Ethereum for the first time, right? For a hacker coming in and getting a sense of what's going on, what could it really look like? So what it could look like is all these different pieces of data at the conference, right, are in an interoperable ecosystem, right? For example, Ethereum. Those transactions, attendance, permissions, roles, and all kinds of food vouchers, all kinds of different forms of data are in this shared ledger that we can all interact with. It really feels like a truly, like Ethereum programmable event, right? And I'm here to say that we're actually not that far away from this kind of state, right? Especially considering how much conferences are ground zero for a lot of new developers coming in. This state is like not too far away. And here's a hot take, but if an Ethereum conference years from now can't get to this kind of state, then have we really graduated from just building more financial applications, as important as they are? Something is seriously wrong if we're not getting to this state. So what would it look like to actually run a conference fully on something like rollups or fully on Ethereum? Well, there's some benefits here. I'm not going to go into too much given time, but okay, you have the benefits of data being owned by the user, you have composability, but it's really hard at this point, right? Transactions still cost a good amount of gas. The friction for using blockchain is still pretty high, even with a lot of the great advances we made around account abstraction and rollups. But is there a way, so going all in to everything needing to be on Ethereum is probably too much friction right now. But is there a way we can get 80% of the way to this sort of environment with only 20% of the effort? And you can probably imagine ZK data is one way we can get 80% of the way to a sort of fully on-chain in-person event with only 20% of the effort. So I'm going to introduce a bit of what Zupass is, kind of starting from its initial story, and I'm going to link these sort of two threads back together at the end. So Zupass started as a project called Zuzlu Passport. It was essentially an open source project spun up by some members in this Zuzlu ecosystem. Zuzlu being a sort of network state kind of experimental event hosted by Vitalik last year, extended into an event called ZooConnect. There are a variety of other data at these events beyond tickets. For example, there were games around frogs. There were volunteer badges issued. There were these little stamps you could collect. So all different forms of data collected at these different events. And a bunch of different apps were also starting to get built, right? And these apps would interact with this data. They would consume and they would produce new forms of data. And until you eventually got this sort of real ecosystem, right? Where the different apps are ingesting data. There are events. All the sort of data that's being produced by an event is actually usable within different kinds of apps. So just to go into a few examples, this Zucat was used for managing Telegram groups, polling for managing voting, and that's what will be used for hackathon voting tomorrow as well as like a wide variety of different things ranging from anonymous chat to games to other forms of collectibles. So what we have here is essentially an ecosystem of data that is easy to make ZK proofs out of, where all these different apps don't have to trust each other and they're able to communicate, but the data that's being used is interoperable. And crucially, there's no need for one centralized server. There actually is no one server that holds like all the data. It's being done through a bunch of these different like apps and services that have their own databases and are able to talk to each other through this permissionless protocol. So we use math here, not trust. So that brings us back to Ethereum conferences in ETH Prague, right, where you might have noticed your ticket being within Zupass, and as well as some sort of apps requesting a ZK proof of your Zupass ticket. For example, here's some screenshots from the Telegram bot Zucat, which requests a ZK proof of your ticket in order for you to join the community hub. Here's what it looks like to log into Zupoll, which is you're creating a ZK proof that you're a member of this set of hackers. And once you've proved it, you're able to vote. So essentially it's private voting based on your proof of attendance to an event. I should also mention that all of this, I'm saying ZK here a lot, but zero-knowledge proofs are really just the tip of a much deeper iceberg of this larger field called programmable cryptography, which is essentially how can we take sort of the advances within cryptography over the last 5-10 years and move them into sort of things that are useful, things that are tangible within experiences such as events, right? So we have things like zero-knowledge proofs, which is finally starting to get to a point that are usable on mobile phones, usable in events at things like Zupass. But we have a whole bunch of more down the stack. We have things like multi-party computation, MPC. We have fully homomorphic encryption, and even getting down to things like crazy ideas such as, can we have a cryptographic AGI? Can we have some sort of network of truth? But I'll sort of save that for maybe another time. Cool, so that's a bit about Zupass. To kind of bring in an example of the developers of one of these apps in this ZK data ecosystem, I wanted to introduce Miriam, who worked on an app called ZooMeet at ETH Berlin this past weekend the ETH Berlin this past weekend. They had a lot of really great memes they also created, so I wanted to highlight that as well. But without further ado, I'll hand it off to Miriam.
Yeah, hi, I'm Miriam from Team ZooMeet. We were a 4-people team, so the rest of my team is back at work or enjoying their weekend. Actually, can I use the clicker? Okay, perfect. Can you guys just show your hands if you are a hacker right now or have been in the past? Okay, so the rest are visitors to the conference, I assume. Just to get a sense. So yeah, we were a game of 4, and we had a gaming development background, and also we're very interested in how we can use games to bring people together at events, and especially hackathons, and maybe get them to connect more, use icebreakers. And on the other hand, some of us were really interested in the topic of decentralized identities and how we can use zero-knowledge proofs and people meeting at offline events and making these connections and storing them, how we can use those proofs to bootstrap an ecosystem of decentralized identities in a similar way that Facebook 10, 20 years ago started within a closed network such as the Harvard campus. And what came out of it in a 2-day hackathon with a live product essentially was then ZooMeet, which was a little bit of a spec'd down version of that, of course. But we had so much fun getting to know the Zupass ecosystem, and we got introduced to so many cool new technologies. And yeah, at 2 or 3 a.m., I heard if your meme game isn't strong by that time, you have no chance to submit a project before the hackathon deadline. But yeah, PCD or POD were some important concepts within the Zupass architecture setup that we used within the ZooMeet app. So what is ZooMeet? If you have by any chance been to ETH Berlin, you still have the folder for ETH Berlin, and you could technically still go on zoomeet.pages.dev and connect with another person now who has also been to ETH Berlin and make a CK proof of your meeting. And yeah, it works. So zoomeet.pages.dev was the app that we developed, and it works within zupass.org on the right side. And it works by scanning each other's ZooMeet/Zupass profile. And once that semaphore ID link is established, so the proof is there that you've met in person, the other person's profile will be pulled from the feed server and also show up in each other's Zupass folder for ZooMeet. So how does it exactly work? So once the one person sets up a profile, which is on the one hand a QR code, and on the other hand, the PCD we made, or POD, was an image you can create, as well as your name, and a tagline can be a wisdom you want to pass on to the person you meet, or can be your Telegram handle. In a future version, this can be a game to play with, but this is what we built so far. And how it works is you go on our app, you verify with Zupass that you're a verified attendee of the event at which you want to connect with the other person, and you subscribe to our feed stream. So that's the third image, which in this hackathon project, it's our centralized feed server, but in a future version, we plan to make it peer-to-peer. Yeah, so once you subscribe to that, and you verified that you are a verified attendee of ETH Berlin or ETH Prague, then you go back and confirm it, and you get to create a profile. Oops, sorry. You get to create a profile, and then the other person can scan your QR code, and like I've mentioned, the full profile shows up in both Zupass accounts, and yeah, you will have a collection of people you've met, and it's CK verified that you have met at this event and location. So we were very proud to have finished this project. We had a great time working with the Zupass team. I can highly, highly recommend building on Zupass. The docs are great, and also the team, Richard, Rob, and Ivan, who we've interacted with throughout the weekend, were super helpful explaining everything. And as far as I understood it, it's going to be a very open architecture that's inviting developers to build upon and build out anything that can be built with CK proofs between people that are meeting in a forum or connecting in a forum. So one thing we built on top, it's basically a feature for event organizers. So for example, this shows who has connected with who, how active is the social graph. For example, if you were to use ZooMeet as an icebreaker app for your event, and you're an event organizer of ETH Prague, you can see how actively people are connecting and can possibly push people to do more of those interactions. This is a bit outdated, but it shows the purpose. Yeah, so it will have a stack of cards in your profile. This is sum it up. This is a little bit the architecture. I'm going to speed up because we want to leave some room for questions. Yeah, so there's a feed stream in between, and upon polling, the PODs show up in both wallets. Like I said, we want to eliminate that in the next version. We also want to make setting up feed streams for specific events accessible to event organizers, so that we don't have to each time add a new event, but you can do it on your own. And yeah, this was a poster we used at ETH Berlin. In that sense, it's been nice to meet you. And I'll hand it back over to Richard to answer some Zupass questions. Where does this go? Yeah.
Are finished. We do have time for some questions, so hands up if you want to ask anything. Oh, there's one. Great.
I'm wondering about revocation, because you're using these sort of as gating tokens for different privileges. Are you thinking about revocation or expiration of the certificates?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I didn't want to get too much in the details for this presentation, but in the actual sort of type for, we call it a ticket PCD. So PCD is sort of the name we use for, the different, let's see, for, not this one. Yeah, so I guess you can see here, this is an ETH Berlin ticket. So the ticket object itself, there's a few different fields, and one of them is this is revoked field that basically is syncs with the event server, and if that revoked is true, it won't allow you to make certain proofs. So basically, applications can request for proofs of your ticket, and they can set certain requirements, right? And one of those requirements can be it has to be a valid ticket that's not been revoked.
Also, like, whenever we can get those missing frogs, that would be really welcome.
Stay tuned, stay tuned.
One more in the back here.
Hi, I have a question. You mentioned that currently there are no centralized servers storing the data, and you also mentioned peer-to-peer networks. How is that working currently, or is this planned?
Yeah, good question. So it's a kind of, there's definitely some kind of trade-off right now between like existing systems. Like if we talk about just events, there's existing data that exists on services like Pretix, which was used for ticketing. There's existing data like, apps like Telegram that are super centralized. I think the key thing that we care about is, just going back a few slides. Yeah, is that like these apps, for example, Zucat, which hooks into Telegram, right? Or Zupoll, which is hosted in its own service. They have, like, these apps are centralized, but the sort of data that's being used across these different apps is like understandable by all these different apps. And they're also not stored on, like one server, right? So Zupass itself stores this data like locally, and we also store like an end-to-end encrypted backup so that you can access it on different devices. But yeah, I think the biggest thing we care about is that the protocols that are used for interacting with this data are open source and decentralized. The apps that are being used are ideally open source, and Zupass itself and other sort of alternative data wallets store things locally and respect privacy.
All right, well, that is our time for Zupass. Thank you both so much. We're gonna just take 5, and we've got an awesome panel coming up next, so stick around.